All right, you're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell. The program is Blues Deluxe, and I'm honored, and it's a great pleasure to have Joe Yuele with me today. How are you, Joe?
Hey, I'm good, John. Thank you. How are you doing?
Good. Welcome to the
Good.
show.
Thank you very much.
I
Nice to
s-
be here.
yeah, I saw you watch my buddy Whittington interview last week.
Yeah, it was great seeing Buddy again. He hasn't changed much. He's just gotten like this. His hair's gotten whiter or lighter.
Yep. Yep.
He's got a big beard now, and it looks good. He looks
So
good.
I want to thank Buddy for connecting us, and I'm going to I'll tell the listening audience who you are. You are a drummer that was in John Mayall's band for 25 years, along with Buddy when he was there for his 15.
That's right.
And
That's right.
he told me a whole bunch of things about you when we were interviewing him. I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But before I do that, rumor has it you grew up here in Massachusetts, in Haverhill, Massachusetts.
That's the rumor. Uh, yeah, man. I can't believe it. I'm talking to you. You're in Haverhill,
I
and I'm in
am.
California.
Yeah.
And I went to school walking distance from your house. I'm quite sure
Yep.
you're close to Haverhill High, right?
Yep. I am.
Yeah. This
So
is incredible,
So you left here when you were 16.
right?
What was that
Yeah.
like to leave here and have to move like that?
Well, man, I've looked back at my life, and that I've had that question asked before. Um, I had a beautiful. I was My family are beautiful people. We had a wonderful, loving family, and but I just had this itch to get out there and get going on it, to get the adventure going.
Yep.
And man, I stuck my thumb out at Salisbury Beach, New Hampshire, and I arrived in Glendale, California 6 days later.
Wow.
And yeah, and man, it's so weird. To think of doing that. If I see a kid today, 16-year-old kid, man, I would tell him, stay away from that kind of business. It's you know it's it I got lucky. It went well. I didn't get in trouble. When I finally contacted my father, he said, just stay out of trouble, and I
Yep.
did. You know,
So what did you do starting out when you got there?
well, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any money. Um, we stopped. This guy that picked me up, and there was a couple other guys. We stopped in Vegas on the way out, and we went in there, and I had whatever, a pocket change, and I played some slot machines and hit a slot pretty good, and that provided the last bit of money we needed to get to California.
Wow.
That Yeah,
How lucky
and we
was that? Think about that. How lucky were you?
yeah, I was real lucky, and well, they threw us out of the casino afterwards. We when I hit that jackpot, it created a fuss, and then everybody started looking, and and the security come over and said, "Can I see some ID?" Well, I don't even think I had an ID, let alone one for 21 years old. And so they weren't rude. They didn't throw us up, but they asked us to leave, and but that provided some hamburgers and some gas to get to California.
So how'd you
And
survive after that once you got to California?
man, it was rough. Like I said, I didn't know anybody, and I slept in city parks with an army blanket that I had, and I was trying to hook up with some kids my own age, and well, they all had a foundation. I didn't. They would be going home for dinner. I'd be whatever, walking the streets for a while, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm going to meet him later or something. But I finally got I met these kids, and I told them I was a drummer and this and that, and they didn't believe me. And one of them had a set of drums at home, and they invited me over to show them that I could play drums, and I did. I got to that guy's drum set, and man, I just played the living daylights out of it. And we got a complaint knocking on the door, and
that's a good thing.
It turned out to be a woman from a theater troupe in Hollywood for a show called The Fantastics, and she said they're auditioning. They need a drummer. They're auditioning drummers, and she gave me the address and the phone number. And I went down the next day, made the audition, and got the gig.
Wow!
And I've been working ever since that day.
And when was that? Do you remember what year that was?
Yeah, that was in 1967. The summer of 67, summer of love. And
what was the summer of love like where you were?
Oh, well, you know, it was pretty wild. It did offer some good arrangements for me back then when I didn't have a place to stay, because, you know, there were so many hippie crash pads, and you know, and so I made my way into a few of those just to, you know, be able to find a piece of a floor somewhere I could lay out on, or maybe a couch or something somewhere. And so you know, and maybe a shower. But, you know, you don't think these things through when you're 16 years old and you're hitchhiking from Massachusetts to California. You know, I thought those trees, those palm trees you'd see in pictures, I thought they were coconut trees. And I thought, well, what's the worst I could do? If I get hungry, I'll eat a coconut. Well, there weren't coconuts. There were no coconuts.
You weren't eating palms either.
I wasn't eating palms either.
No.
But I would panhandle and try to buy a hamburger. And so I noticed a strange thing. Huh?
So the Fantastics was the first thing that you did?
I'm sorry, one more time?
That performance the first thing that you were involved with. What happened after that? What happened after that? What did you do after that?
Well, man, it's pretty incredible, really. I got the gig because I could read drum charts, and I got the gig, and so I'm with them. I don't know how many nights a week they were open, maybe 4 or 5 nights a week. I really don't remember, but so I'm doing this thing, the Fantastics, in a small band, and later that night, I got somebody gave me a note with a name and a phone number to call them. It was Mercury Records. There was somebody in there from Mercury Records, and they were looking for a drummer for a brand new band, a brand new Mamas and the Papa copy band. They had a record deal and they were recording. And so I went down into that audition next, maybe a week after getting that first gig, and I got that gig. Now, man, I'm in a recording band. It was just amazing. And those guys, all those people I met then, they're friends, lifelong friends. There's you know, people that good players that I met during that little area, and some of them are still my friends to today. But you know, man, I've been working ever since that first audition. I was able to trace gigs back to that gig for years. I could say, well, I got this gig from this guy who was there and told this guy that, you know, one thing led to another. But, you know, that's the music business, word of mouth, you know.
So you started out doing non-blues stuff originally in different types of places and with different types of bands. When did blues come into your repertoire?
Well, you know, man, I got lucky. Wow, there's a lot of luck there now that I think of it. I met a guy on one of the. I think he was involved with that Mercury Records band.
Yeah.
They were called the Collage, by the way, and it was a pop band, 2 girls, 2 guys, and this guy was that I met. This guitar player, very good guitar player by the name of Robert Stamps, and he was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, and he took me to meet all his buddies, and I swear these guys, they must have known 50 of these guys, and they were all good friends from high school. And they just plugged me into their whole social scene. All of a sudden, I've got friends, I've got contacts, as well as the whole California car culture, surf culture, rock and roll culture. And there it was, And so maybe about to answer your question, Robert, one of the guys he turned me on to was a guy named John Juke Logan.
Yeah.
And Juke, Duke was a great musician, a true hipster, and a great songwriter and singer, harp player, piano player, and he had a working blues band, and he asked me to join his band, and so that's the first gig I think where I was starting to play blues.
That was when, roughly when? What year?
Roughly 74. So
wow.
I was in and out of a lot of pop bands, I suppose, from 67 to 74. But Duke had it going on, man. They had a great little band. And they would do all these ski resorts and different resorts. And we just had a great time. Just a great time.
How long did that last? How long did that last with Duke?
Well, it lasted through the 70s, probably into the right up into the 80s, right up until I got this gig, really, with John. But Juke, oh man, I can't say enough about Juke, because he not only was the band leader and the singer and the songwriter, but he also booked the band.
Yeah,
and we had as much work as we wanted. We were very busy.
So 85, a little further up in time, is when you joined John's band. How'd you meet John Mayall?
Through Coco Montoya. One of the connections through Juke, we would do these blues shows with traveling blues artists like Albert Collins. And we would back up Albert Collins quite a bit in Los Angeles. And his drummer at the time was Coco Montoya.
Yep.
Yeah.
People don't realize Coco was a drummer first and then a guitarist.
That's right. And a very good drummer.
Yeah.
But we didn't. Juke hired Albert, and we were going to back him up. So there was really no room for Coco in that. But we became friends. And then eventually Coco started the Coco Montoya band, and he hired me to play drums for him. And he was with John Mayall for about a year, maybe like around 1984. And in 85, a year later, John's drummer at the time decided he wanted to do another career or whatever.
Yep.
I'm not sure. I never really followed what he did, but he left. He wanted to get out of the band, and Coco brought me in, and I met John Mayall in John's living room, and we went there, and I set up a little set of drums. We played a few shuffles. John loved the shuffles, and he hired me on the spot, and I managed to keep that gig for some 25 years later.
Wow.
Yeah, and Coco was in that band for 10 years. And then Coco went out to do the Coco Montoya band full time.
Yep.
And that's where Buddy Whittington came in.
Yep. And Walter Trout was in there too with Coco and you for a little while.
That's right. Walter and I joined John on the same day. On the same day. Yeah. It was John, Coco, Bobby Haynes on bass, real good bass player, good guy. and Walter Trout and me. And Walter and I hit it off right away. You know, he's just kind of a lovable guy. You know, he's he's a lot of fun to be with, and we just kind of yucked it up together pretty much. And he stayed with John for 5 years, and then he left to do the Walter Trout band.
Yeah.
But I was in Walter's band. I was his first drummer. I was Coco's first drummer. I was Debbie Davies' first drummer.
Yeah.
And then I was playing drums with John Mayall at the same time.
Wow.
And so I was busy. And one of the reasons Coco recommended me was because if John wasn't working, then Coco would be working. Well, then he knew I would be free as well. And since I was already his drummer, so it was a pretty good arrangement. I would
the best of both worlds. He had you play with him when Mayall wasn't, and you play with Mayall when he wasn't. Pretty cool.
That's right. That's pretty cool. And the same thing with Walter.
Yeah.
And I mean, man, I was busy. There was no time off for me, you know, because both of those guys worked as much as they could. And then, like I mentioned, Debbie Davies was busy too. And so, wow, it was a great time.
And she was really playing with Albert Collins right there early on, Debbie.
Yeah, she was. Yep. I think Coco helped her get that job with Albert, and it was great. It was a great lineup. Albert had a horn band then, and he had Debbie playing rhythm and doing leads also.
Yeah,
and Albert was the most exciting blues artist I think that there was at the time. You know, and you know he got sick and with cancer, but he was so exciting, man. My favorite gigs that I did with Juke and them, the blues gigs, was backing up Albert Collins. He just had this spirit about him. He'll play a straight blues, and we'd go through all that, and we would stop the song, end the song, and he would immediately go into like a funk groove, almost like a James Brown. And he had that funny look about it. And man, that groove, when we would just latch onto that, and we might play that groove for 20 minutes, I'm not kidding you, on one chord. And Albert had this thing he used to do where he had a real long guitar cord, like around 200 feet. He had a spool with cord on it.
Yeah.
And we were playing the what that was named, the Fox Venice Theater in Venice, California.
Yeah.
Packed. This place is packed. A couple thousand people. And we're in the middle of, or towards the end of the set, and Albert decides to do the stroll, man, to take the walk. And so he goes down into the audience, and people are going nuts. And we're playing that funk groove again that he started off.
Yeah.
And so he's down in the audience, and he's just playing this funky thing. And he kept on walking. And like the Pied Piper, he walked out into the lobby of the theater and out into the street. I think it was Lincoln Boulevard. He walked out there, and everybody followed him. The entire house emptied, and we're still on stage playing that funk groove, and Albert's out in the streets.
Yep.
And he ended the gig out there. He never came back, and the people never came back.
Wow.
You know, we saw him again later on, but it was just, oh man, so unique.
That's a great Albert Collins story.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. You
so,
know, he really,
so what was Mayall like when you first met him? What was he like?
When I first met John, he was about a year sober, and he was having a little bit of a little difficulty, I think, hanging out, relating to other people. because he was a heavy drinker for a while there. And so he was sober now and determined to stay sober. And he did. He never went back on the bottle. And so it was a little, it might be a little bit uncomfortable just to make conversation with John back then because he was struggling. And with that, musically, he was great. He was doing everything he did. He had no problems. He was playing great, singing great. But I think he was a little uptight at that back in those days because he wasn't drinking. But eventually he got used to it and fell into the groove, and he's just a great guy, just a good guy to hang out with. We were close for a lot of years.
Yeah, I remember seeing you guys come here to the House of Blues in Cambridge when it was open back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a great place to see John and you. Actually, I was in the green room with both of you that night, and your whole family was with you. It came to see you.
Right. Yeah. They always made all the gigs we did local in the New England area.
Yeah.
And they would even sometimes go to New York to see us play there. And in fact, we played Carnegie Hall and with Dr. John and Etta James. And my family, they were all there. And it was wonderful. I mean, because, Carnegie Hall is a pretty good gig and pretty good place to play. And they were proud. Now, my family's all into music anyway, so they would show up at all the gigs in the greater New England area. It was nice, real nice.
Now, Buddy mentioned to me that when you were the 25 years you were with Mayall, there was no roadies. You and Mayall did most of that work of managing what was going on the road with the band. Is that correct or wrong?
Well, we weren't really roadies. We were handling the tour managing duties.
Correct. That's what he meant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he I don't remember when it got started, but he asked me. We were at the curb at, I think, LAX. It could have been another city though. And we had all this gear and people looking at us like, where are you going to put that stuff? And he asked me, he said, maybe you could talk to this sky cap and convince him to help us get this stuff on. And so that's what I made a pass at that. And I got lucky. I found a guy, a good-natured guy. And I told him my situation. He goes, yeah, man, what are you going to give me? So I gave him a good tip, and he got everything on. I think we probably saved John at that particular time, several $100s to get all the gear on.
Yeah.
And then it went so well that John, every day he'd give me a whatever, $100 or something, and say, work your magic. And it usually went pretty well.
And
sometimes a guy would say, well, man, that's all you got. I'd have to give him a little bit more, but always saving John a lot, especially overseas.
Yeah.
Flying overseas, So we did that. But as far as the roadies, the touring in Europe the promoters always provided roadies for us.
Yep.
And in the States, the promoters would provide a driver with a van, and as the years progressed, John was getting more and more successful. His records were selling better, things were doing better.
Yeah.
And Stevie Ray Vaughan came along and kind of helped everybody, nudged everybody forward a little bit, and blues became so popular because of him. And John his career just he was busier in those days, I think, than he ever was.
But, tell me, let's talk about the records, all the records you've been on. What I can ask you what favorite, but I bet you there's a bunch of them that you enjoy from those years with Mayall. List a few of them that you really, really, really loved playing on. I mean, you gave me a whole list of um, music you're gonna want me to play before and after our interview. But tell me, what were your favorite records to play on?
Well, I think the best record we did was called "Wake Up Call," and it was nominated for a Grammy. And the title cut, "Wake Up Call," is I think my favorite record I made with John, favorite single record. It had Mavis Staples singing with John, and Mick Taylor playing guitar, and we they Silvertone Records. Okay, John was on Silvertone Records. Buddy Guy was on Silvertone, and Silvertone. We did a song called "I Could Cry," and Buddy Guy and John Mayall did a duet on it. And Silvertone liked what they heard so much that they put it on Buddy Guy's record as well. His record was his album was called "Feels Like Rain."
Yep.
And it also got nominated for a Grammy. So there we are with 2 Grammy nominations for playing one record. And well, we didn't win the Grammy, or I should say John didn't win the Grammy, but Buddy did. And so that record was a lot of fun. We got a lot of mileage out of that. And then a few years later, he's done so many records. I think I'm on about 15 records with him.
Yep.
15 albums. And one called "Along for the Ride." He had all these great artists guesting on it. Billy Preston, Billy Gibbons, Mick Fleetwood, Steve Miller. The names just go on and on. There's so many names on that. And that was really a gas to play that record. I mean, we were playing, and I'm looking at Buddy. We're both kind of like cracking up. And there's Billy Preston. I says, "Buddy," I says, that's the 5th Beatle. We're playing with the 5th Beatle.
There you go.
It was a gas. It was a lot of fun. And they're all fun, though. When you go in for a session, you always go in with high expectations of making a great record. Everybody have that mindset. And and John's wide open, man. When it comes to music, he's got so much of what we're going to play that's written out or whatever. But if the spirit strikes somebody to do something special, John encourages them all the way. There might be a solo that somebody wasn't planning on taking or something, but he might have done something and it felt so good that they kept it, things like that, and John, it was always a gas to go into the studio with him, and we did quite a few times.
One of the early ones, Chicago Line, had both Coco and Walter on it. What was that? What was that record like?
Well, that record was pretty cool. We made it in Germany. There's a guy over in Germany, if I can remember his name. He will come to me as soon as we stop talking. But there was a guy in Germany who was the German Bruce Springsteen, if you will. A huge solo artist over there.
Yep.
Peter something. I'll think of his name. And he had a studio. He built a studio for his own recordings. Beautiful studio in Bavaria, in the south of Germany, which is the prettiest part of Germany. And that's where we did the record. That's where we did Chicago Line. And so it was just great, man. And they put us up in everybody had their own chalet overlooking the mountains, and it was just wonderful. That was a gas. But yeah, so Chicago line, and he did. John has done some funny things though that
Yeah.
you might not consider the way to do something. But we were heading to the Eastern Bloc with John to Europe, the Eastern Bloc, Eastern Europe, and he had a little cassette player that he had got. It was like a mini boom box, and you
Yep.
could record on it. Well, he gave that. We were doing a gig in Paich, Hungary, and he gave that little boom box to the sound man out in the house. And he says, he gave him instructions. He says, when the concert starts, push record. So the guy did. And maybe 3 months later, we're at the airport in LA, and John's handing us albums. What's this? He goes, this is the album that we made in Paich, Hungary. We didn't even know we were recording. And he turned that little cassette recorder into a record that Silvertone released.
Which was called what?
Huh?
What was the name of that album that was
Well,
released?
the name of that was Behind the Iron Curtain.
Wow. I didn't know that was from a cassette.
That was from a cassette.
Wow.
You would never do something like that, but
John
John's
did.
old school. He comes from a different place, but those gigs were pretty cool because we were playing to little communist kids, if you will.
What was that like to play over there? What for you?
It was the greatest. These kids were so into it. They wouldn't allow bands from the West to play there. The only two bands I heard that they would allow over there was John Mayall and Carlos Santana. And we ran into Carlos and his great band over there somewhere in the Eastern Bloc. But the gigs were great, man. They were great. It was not unusual to have 10,000 people at some of these gigs. And we did I think it was the same night with the little cassette player. The outpouring of emotion from these kids towards the end of that show was, it gave me goosebumps. They were just so into it. It's unbelievable. At the end of the show, I went to the edge of the stage and I took some drumsticks and threw them out to the audience. And the place went nuts. And whoever caught the sticks, they ran to the stage, and about, I don't even know, a couple hundred kids followed them. And there I was with these kids down there at the edge of the stage. And they're so emotional. Many of them were crying. Their emotions were so high that they were actually crying. And I was just overwhelmed by oh man, it was just such a wonderful thing. It was awe-inspiring, really was. And I'm signing everything they got. Their T-shirt, the drumsticks, their hand, wherever. And maybe 5 minutes into that, our tour management came down and grabbed me to get me out of there. And I said, what are you doing, man? I want to hang out with these guys. And they says, come on, you got to go now. Well, as it turned out, the KGB, literally the KGB, were watching the whole thing. And they came down from their perch down to get this drummer who was inciting a riot.
Wow.
Yeah. And as it turns out, I barely got out of there.
Incredible.
They wanted to arrest me. And these guys that grabbed me, they just kept on taking me further and further away. And I'm going like, what the hell is going on? What do you got? And when it was all explained, and I looked back and saw what was going on. And these KGB men, you see guys with guns in America, they got their finger over the trigger guard like this. These guys had their finger in the trigger guard.
Yeah.
And they were,
serious business.
They mean business. And we got lucky. Yeah, I'm sure they would have arrested me, and who knows how long it would have taken to get
Here's a question.
released.
Here's a question out of left field. Padlock on the Blues, the record that you did. You did that with John Lee Hooker. What was that like, having John Lee Hooker on a record?
Well, I'm laughing, man, because the whole thing was unusual. We flew up, John, myself, and our engineer. Once again, I'm having a mental block for his name. Joe, what was Joe's last name? It will come to me. We flew up to San Francisco to record with John Lee. And man, there's no telling what they told him. But John gave me a camera and says, do me a favor, snap some pictures of John Lee. We were waiting outside the studio, and a limousine pulled up, and John Lee got out, and I'm starting to snap pictures.
You're kidding me. John Mayall was a fanboy wanting to get pictures of John Lee. Wow.
Yeah. The pictures ended up on the album, on the inner sleeve. But John Lee, right away, his manager came up to me and says, no pictures. And I'm thinking, man, we're doing a record together. Why don't you want a picture? But, it was so unusual. You just know to just be cool and let's see what happens. So in the studio, when we got done recording, I'm snapping a few more. And once again, no pictures. So I'm trying to make everybody happy. John wants pictures. These guys don't want pictures. And I just went for it and snapped a bunch.
Was that the first time that John met John Lee, or had he before? Do you know?
No, they were friends from years before. Yeah, they knew each other. I don't think the no pictures thing, I don't think John Lee had anything to do with it. I think it was his management.
Yep.
And they had some kind of a strange reason why. I don't even know. They never explained it. Just kept on saying, no pictures.
Well, the other thing is John Lee was getting old, I think, during that period of time, too. And probably he wanted to get, for posterity, pictures of John.
Yeah. It could very well be. It could have been a legitimate thing. It just, I was kind of put on the spot because Mayall asked me to take some pictures, and I was happy to do it. And so we got a pretty nice shot of John, the two Johns sitting next to each other in the studio, and I don't think it's on the CD, but there was an LP. And there was a big picture of it. And I think I got a credit. a
photo credit, right?
Yeah. But it was interesting to play those. We were in the middle of a song. We're playing John Mayall, me, John Lee, and somebody else was playing rhythm, I think. But anyways, we're playing, John singing, and then John Lee started singing. And John stopped him. He says, no, John, just play guitar. And John Lee says, oh, John, let me sing. I want to sing one. Well, he never did. I never understood why. But
wow,
John Lee got way into the session. He was enjoying himself.
That's good.
Yeah.
So
and then they added everything else after. All the other guys in the band, their parts were all overdubbed later. It was just the three of us initially putting down those tracks.
So John turned 90 this past, what is it, November, December last year.
Yeah, November, yeah.
And 20 years before, you guys did a birthday concert for him that there's a double CD of, with two of the first original Bluesbreaker guitar players, Eric Clapton and Mick Taylor. What was the 70th birthday recording like with those two guys?
It was great. It was a magic thing. Everybody was on. Everybody. It was a UNICEF benefit for UNICEF, and it was at a beautiful venue in the docks area of Liverpool. So there we are in Liverpool, and with Eric Clapton, Mick Taylor in the horn section, and the production was, it was a 10 camera shoot.
Yeah.
They had cameras on tracks, like railroad tracks. The guys walking around with cameras, and there was a guy crawling all over my drum set with a camera, and he says, "Man, do you mind that I'm you know, I hope I'm not in your way. Do you? Is it okay? Do you mind me being here?" And I says, "Man," I says, "my mother's going to see this." I says, "You can be all over that drum set if you want to. Feel free to go any way you'd like." So it really was a gas, man. You know, we had a rehearsal in London a couple of days before that concert, and it was with Eric, and you know, he came prepared. He knew all the songs we were going to do. He played great. I mean, just as professional as you could, you know, want. And we got to hang out a little bit, he and I, and he's into hot rods. I'm into hot rods, and so we spent some time talking about cars, Eric and I.
Yeah.
But the gig was great, man. It was kind of like a 40-year reunion for John and Eric, and you know, we had seen and played with Mick Taylor many times over the years. Mick always showed up, or we did co-bills with John Mayall and Mick Taylor, and but this was the first time any of us played with Eric, and you know, it was great, man. You know, you could feel the energy. The people loved it. Eric played his ass off. He just the consummate professional. And
what was Mick like? What was Mick Taylor like? You just explained what Eric was like. Tell me what Mick was like when you played with him various times.
Well, you know, he's an amazing guitar player. I know you know that.
Yep.
But a lot of times he would sit in with us, and somebody would roll out a guitar rig, like a stack of Marshalls or something. And without any sound check or anything, Mick would just plug in and just burn, man. He would play his ass off. And it didn't matter what the rig was. He knew how to make it work. And so it was a gas playing with Mick. It always was. And that gig was the same. You know, he was kind of like a member of the band. We saw him so much, you know. And but he's just a great player, just an excellent player.
Well, the trio. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying he's a real mellow guy, a good guy.
And there was a third guitar player, a trio in the early days of Peter Green, and Buddy was mentioning that, you know, you opened and Mayall opened on some of those shows with Peter Green. What was Peter Green like?
Well, you know, he's like, to sound like I'm English, he was a lovely guy. He really was just a real nice, sweet man. And you know, he could still play. He wasn't the player that he was back in the day.
Yep.
But you know, it was still really, really good, and he had a very, very good band. And we would we did about, I think, 30 or 35 one-nighters with Peter. One night would be John headlining, next night would be Peter headlining.
Yep.
And it went that way back and forth through the whole tour. And but yeah, man, he really fielded a great band, Peter did. And you know, I'm a little hard of hearing, and Peter talks real soft, so it was difficult for me to talk to him, because he would say something. I hate to keep on saying, "Now, what was that?" You know, but I had a hard time kind of making out what he was saying. But he was a nice guy, man. You know, what it's so cool about in Europe, the hotels offer breakfast that comes with the room.
Yep.
So if you were on tour with a band, like we did tours with Eric Burden for instance. At breakfast, you'd see everybody. And you go down there and you'd hang out, and it was a great opportunity to get to know these people. I got to hang out with Carlos Santana that way, having breakfast with him. And one time in Italy, we did some gigs with Greg Allman, and there I was having breakfast with Greg Allman, and it was just the coolest, laid back. Rare opportunity to get to know these people.
You got a poster right behind you where it says John Mayall and Greg Allman.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, this one here says Greg Allman.
Yeah.
I don't know if am I pointing to it?
Yeah, you are.
There it is.
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there.
Right there. And this one next to it, this is from the Peter Green John Mayall tour.
Yeah.
And that one right there. Everybody signed that one. That's why I got that one up there. And the promoter had these made up. What these are? It's a list of all the cities we played, and congratulations to the individuals from the promoters.
Wow.
Yeah. So that breakfast thing, it's a unique thing. It really is, because, man, I'm having eggs with hot sauce with Peter Green. You know what I mean? It's just
yeah.
It's every day, and there's so much that you can talk about with these guys once you're seeing them. And I did bring a bottle of hot sauce with me from my buddy in Louisiana gave me.
Yeah.
And I turned a couple of those English guys onto it, and man, they loved it. And so every day, at breakfast, they'd be over there trying to swipe a couple licks of my hot sauce,
Well, tell me a road story about John.
A road story. There's so many. He
a good one.
A good one. Oh God, I haven't thought of these for quite a while, but John wouldn't eat dinner when everybody ate dinner. He would be there. He would take the food and like sometimes it'd be catered by some real good people. Like we did a couple of tours with ZZ Top, and that was always catered. Well, John would be there when everybody was sitting down to eat, and he would take his dinner and put it in a Ziploc bag. And he would seal it up real good, and he would take the pastries and seal them up real good. And he would go home go back to the hotel. And he would do this every day, no matter where he was.
Wow.
And you'd see John, and he'd be having dinner in a dressing room somewhere. And I'd go, well, John, what is that? And he goes something like, well, I'm not sure, but I think I collected it in Ottawa, Canada last week. And he'd be, and people would be flipping out because there's no refrigeration. He would keep this stuff in his suitcase.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, man. But we were going to Australia one time, and there were signs as you come into Auckland, New Zealand first, and then you go to Australia. So we're going through customs in Auckland, and there's signs that saying, "Do not bring any meat products," or yada yada yada, whatever.
Uh-oh.
Is right. They're checking our suitcases out, and they gets to John's suitcase. He had this big ass suitcase, and they open it up, and because they can smell something, they open it up, and there's all these layers of food that John had collected over the past couple of weeks. And man, they came to arrest him.
Wow.
Yeah, a couple of guys came, and they had that stance. They grab you by the arm, and I looked over, and we had got through because we didn't bring food like that. We didn't, we were happy to eat the fresh stuff, but they got John, and I looked over at John, and man, he's got a look on his face like, oh boy, what have I done now? And just then, somebody in the police department recognized him and come over and bailed him out. Got the other guys.
Wow.
Oh, leave him alone. That's John Mayall. Leave him alone. And they took him. They took him away. So there was no consequences to it, to his actions. But but that was pretty lucky that guy recognized him.
I have a story. Go ahead.
There were food stories all over the place, man. All over the place. He would do stuff. One time he opened up some food on the bus. It smelled so bad. He goes, "Oh, I think this one is turned." And it was taking turned. Man, that thing turned a week ago.
When did he eat? When did he eat?
Huh?
If he saved it all, when did he eat anything?
Well, he would eventually catch up to the date. Like if it's Monday and you collected a meal, and Tuesday you collected a meal, and Wednesday you collected a meal, you know, by Thursday you're ready for Monday. And then once you're in the, you know, the rotation, well, then you're eating the day before every other day. Like,
yep.
And so he always ate. He loved to eat. And if you went to his room, he would do something like he would take an ironing board and lay it out and put all his different food on the ironing board. If we're going to be there a couple of days, this would be Tuesday's dinner, and then this would be Wednesday's dinner, and it would be all laid out. And he would take pastries, cakes, and whatever there was, and he would put them in a bag, and he would smack the bag on the table, bam, 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 and crush everything together. He would get it real flat, and then he would put it, you know, those little refrigerators in hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And they got the little ice maker, and there's a little gap between the top of the freezer and the top of the refrigerator. He would cram that pastry thing in there and leave it overnight. And he would take that, and every day he would freeze it. And when he wanted pastries throughout the day, he would just snap off a piece, and it would be like an ice pastry. I'm cracking up, man. It's just too funny. But yeah, that was John, man. And he could sleep anywhere. You're asking about road stories. We got picked up at the airport in Chicago. We're going to play Buddy Guy's place. And our old booking agent, John Gabriziak, picked us up. He's got a small car. We got 4 guys, John Gabriziak, and all the luggage, and it's just not, it's tough to fit it. We're going to call a cab. John says, "Do you have a boot on this car?" Well, that's English for a trunk. So yeah, we got a boot. He opened the boot, and John crawled into there, and Gabriziak, he's going, "John, what are you doing? I'm going to call a cab. We're not going to all go to the gig in this. We need another vehicle." John says, "I'm fine." He goes in there, closes the trunk lid, and goes to sleep. And the driver is freaking out, man, because it's so illegal, really. And so we get to Buddy Guy's place, Legends, in Chicago. And the driver's so nervous, he can't wait to open up the door to see how John's doing. And we open the door and open the trunk lid, and he's in there snoring. He is just sleeping sound as a baby. And we wake him up. He gets out, and he's got Firestone in reverse written across here. You know, inflate to 26 pounds.
Yep.
The logo for Firestone tires is imprinted in where he'd been laying on the tire, on the spare.
Yeah. And
man, at the end of the gig ends. We're going to go back to the airport. We're leaving in the morning. It's back in the trunk again. And by the time we got to the airport, he was sound asleep again.
Wow.
And he could sleep anywhere, and he did. He would eyeball a situation, and like in a car or a bus. Maybe it was a bus that wasn't so outfitted to take care of too many people. Seating arrangement. John would be underneath it all on the floor. He'd find a place to sleep, and we'd be all kind of like uncomfortable. John would be snoring away, having a nice sleep. But he could sleep anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
I got a story.
There's so many stories like that, man.
I got a story for you about him when I saw him at the House of Blues. I brought it's called the Blues Book, with all black and white photos of blues masters from all. I don't know if you remember those when that came out.
It sounds familiar.
And he was in it, and I got him to autograph his picture. And then he starts looking at the rest of the book, explaining to me when he met half these people that are in the book, and what those people were like. And it's like, wow, incredible.
Well, yeah, that's cool, man. He knew everybody.
He did.
He still does. He knows it. I should say he knows everybody. But we had blues jams in London back in the early '60s, and all these guys were there.
Yeah.
Eric Clapton to Jimi Hendrix, and everybody in between, and they would all show up. He was with Brian Jones the night Brian died, the night he drowned.
John
He was with, yeah.
John, oh, wow.
It was just the two of them. He told me that story, and he was with Brian, kind of trying to show some support to him. I know Brian was struggling quite a bit right then, and John was with him the night he died. And 2 days later, Mick Jagger called John up looking for a guitar player, because now the Rolling Stones had lost their guitar player. And John says, "You can have Mick Taylor." He says, "I'm changing my lineup. You can have Mick." And that's how Mick Taylor got the job with the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
But and he told me that the Beatles used to come to his flat. John had a flat, and he had a pretty good collection of blues records, which was pretty rare back then, especially in England. And he says that Paul McCartney and George Harrison and whoever, Ringo or whoever, would come over, drink his warm beer, and play blues records all night.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were driving to a gig, and John directed the driver, make a left here, make a right there, go down here and pull over to the curb. And he says, "Fellas, this is where the Beatles used to come to hang out with me, to drink my warm beer." And I asked him when was that in their career, and he says that's when they were doing. That's when they did Eleanor Rigby, because he was invited to that session, and that's how he remembered what it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you left Mayall, what was the reason for leaving Mayall after 25 years? Was it him? Was it you? Was there something going on you were going to do? You wanted to move on, or?
Well, man, when I reached 18 years with John, I was pretty burnt. And I was talking to my wife, Patty, one night. I says, "Babe, I'm going to try to make 2 more years. I'm going to make it to 20 years, and I'm just going to retire. I don't want to retire from the band. I want to retire from the road." And I said, "So when I get to 2 more years," I said, "that's it. I'm just going to have to retire. I can't take it." My doctor was trying to get me to quit. I had heart palpitations, and she says it's too much stress. You're not sleeping and this and that. And it was true. So I decided, well, okay, I'm going to do 2 more years, and that's it. So I reached 20 years, and I thought, it's getting close. I got to make the announcement. And we were doing a gig in Malibu, a nice gig in Malibu. And John, completely unbeknownst to me, gets on the mic, and he says, "I want to present my drummer of 20 years with a gold watch." So I had no idea this was going to happen. So he gave me the gold watch on stage in front of all the audience and everything. And it was a pretty nice gesture. It was a pretty nice deal. And I just couldn't tell him at that point that I was wanting to retire. But so I stayed on for another few years, and then it was time for me. I had to get off the road, and so that's what I did. I'm not sure what arrangements John might have had for everybody else, but it was time for me to retire, and that's that. I didn't want to leave John. I wanted to leave the road, and I suggested that he tries to do some of these residency gigs that the different casinos have, and he wasn't into that. So, he stayed on the road, and I retired, and that's that was my situation. I don't know what other arrangements the other guys might have had with it, but that's what we had going on.
What are you doing today? I know you're still recording.
Oh, I'm open to play anything, and anything that I want to here locally. Or I say locally, Los Angeles. We live a couple hours from Los Angeles. My wife and I. We're up in the mountains of Tehachapi. We got a little ranch that we developed up here. But if someone calls me, if the music is good enough, I'm there. I'll do it. And I got a little studio here at the house, and I do recordings with remote recordings. This all came about because of COVID. Yeah. Guys were still recording. You put down your drum track, send it to the bass player. He puts his bass track. He sends it to the guitar player. He puts his his guitar track, and so on. And that's it's kind of evolved, and I'm doing quite a bit of that here at the house.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a creative outlet, and you can take your time putting down a drum track. It can sound pretty fabulous, which is unusual for my drum tracks. You can take your time and really make a nice track. Put some overdrives on it and stuff. But
let's talk about James Harmon. You and I have talked about him. Tell me about your relationship with him when he was alive. And I mean, he was something else.
Yeah, James was a great one. He was a natural born musician, entertainer, great ear for music, great singer, great harp player. And just a great guy, funny guy. God, he was so clever, and he'd have you in stitches if you hung out with him. And but I knew James back going back to the Juke Rhythm Band days, Juke Logan back in the 70s. They were very close, and Juke introduced me to James. That's why I know James. But when I knew James back then, now you think of James Harmon, you think of the cool pompadour hair he's got, right?
Yeah.
When I knew James, when I first met James, he had hair down below his back and a beard to match. And so he was a complete different character than, but James, he was great. Everybody loved seeing him. Whenever you see him, whenever, you heard he was there, everybody loved to be around him, and just, man, he was just hilarious. He just had a natural way and clever way of saying funny things and talking about music and musicians. And I told you that story. He was playing with Muddy Waters, and Muddy was introducing him, and Muddy had his own way of verbalizing whatever it was he was going to say. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the young man on a harmonist, James Harmon." He never got his name out. It never came out. James Harmon, the young man on a harmonist. And James loved to tell that story. And every time he told it, it got a little funnier. And he would imitate Muddy just a little bit different. And it was just hilarious. And so when we would see James, we'd say, "The young man on the harmonist." And he would
crack up.
Yeah, he would crack up. It was that joke was always there, always. I can't remember a time when we weren't saying that with him, you know. I'm honest. You know. Oh, it was great.
Did you ever play with him at all?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. James asked me to join his band, and I had to turn it down because I was with John, and it was just financially there was no way to make it work. And he was working full time. James was, so it wasn't like I could do a couple gigs here and there, and that'd be all right, you know. He wanted me to join his band, and I wanted to. I really did. I was a fan from day one, but I never did join the band, but I have done gigs with them.
Yeah.
You know, pickup gigs or gigs where somebody couldn't make it or something in greater Los Angeles. And we would just wing it, you know, no rehearsals. But it was easy to play with James, man. You know, it was easy to play with James. He might call off the key and just right there, here we go, fellas, you know.
Yep.
And you know, and that was his persona, man. He was just this cool cat, you know, and it was a ball. It really was. I wished I could have been a member of his band and play them old drums. He had one of those old painted set of drums with the harvest moon and the, you know, and the whatever the scene was on the bass drum, you know, and maybe some lights in there or something. But that's what he wanted me to play. But I never had a chance to play them, you know.
Yeah.
But it would have been great. Yeah. Love James.
So do you still talk to John at all? John Mayall?
Well, you know, he's not doing that good right now. I'm real good friends with his best friend from college days, a guy named Ray Cummings and his wife Janet. We got very close. Ray came to all the gigs that we did with John in England, or all the gigs in London, and we got very close. So when I left the band, I still stayed in touch with Ray Cummings, and
that's how you find out about what's going on with John.
yes, and his wife wrote me a letter. Ray's wife wrote me last Christmas, and they had just talked to John's sister Caroline, and Caroline had told them that John had dementia, and so it's really not he's really not that available to hang out with him anymore. He's
and that's why he's off he came off the road too, probably.
Yeah, you know, he did a gig up in Fargo with an old buddy of mine went to, and this is after I left the band, and they had just finished a song, whatever the song was, I don't know, but they just finished the song, and John got on the mic and introduced that same song again, and it kind of went that way for the whole show, and so he's been struggling with that stuff, and from what I understand, he can't remember a lot of the things now. He doesn't do interviews for that reason. He can't remember any of the old stories. But so to answer your question, I haven't talked to him because of that. You know, I would like to see him, but he has this woman who helps some of his affairs, and she suggested that he's happy doing what he's doing, but that his memory is gone. So
that's sad.
Yeah, it is. It's real sad. It's real sad. And you know, his mother lived to be 97, and he's probably got some of that going on for him. He might live for another, who knows, 7-10 years.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But I'm thinking he's probably still healthy, and he gets that from his mother, you know. But it would be nice to see him. You know, he was a big movie buff. He probably still is, and he got me into it. And we used to bring DVD players on the road, he and I, and we would exchange movies, and we might watch 50 movies in a tour, you know. And then he had built a real nice professional theater in his house. And we went there every Wednesday for years and watched movies. And so I'm thinking he's probably still watching a lot of movies.
Well, name one, if you can remember, a movie he really liked.
What are you saying that again now?
Name a movie that you remember that he really enjoyed.
Oh God, that he really enjoyed. Well, he was really into it, and he knew everybody in the movies. He knew their name. Like you could mention a movie, and whatever it might be, Barefoot in the Park. I'm making that up. He'd tell you, but Barefoot in the Park. Yeah, that was this guy, and he was there, and he just it was his first gig he ever did as a character actor, and so and so. And I mean, he really knew the stuff. So his favorite movie, I'm not sure what would be a favorite movie. He really thousands and thousands of movies he's watched, and yeah,
wow.
He likes. I know he liked The Sopranos. They weren't a movie, but he liked that a lot. And sometimes he would say there'd be a movie, and I'd say, John, what do you think of that movie? He'd go, oh, I didn't care for it. No, I didn't think it was very good. And I'm thinking, well, geez, I mentioned it because I thought it was a great movie. But he's real particular about it.
Yeah.
But he's real knowledgeable about movies. At least he was.
So, Joe, how do people find out about you? Is there any way that online? Do you have a website or Facebook page or anything?
Well, somebody did a Facebook page on me, and I never kept up with it, so I don't know if that's happening. But if somebody wanted to write me, I'd be happy to hear from them on my email address, which is Joe Yuele, one word, at gmail.com.
Great.
And yeah, please, give me a holler. Let me know what's going on. And yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be nice.
And one other question I forgot to ask you. When you started becoming famous, when did your family what happened? Did your family connect with you after, all those years of you moved to California? So when did your family really realize that you were doing great?
Well, my father and I always wrote each other. I felt so bad of what I put them through. They must have been just terrible for them because they're loving family, and I got a brother and two sisters. So it was a lot of emotions right there. And but my father and I kept in touch. He just said, "Stay out of trouble," and he always signed with the G clef at the end of the letter.
Yeah.
But he got sick. I got a job with Dobie Gray.
Yeah, I forgot to ask you about Dobie Gray. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Dobie. Yeah, that was another real great gig. And we're touring America with Dobie Gray, 1977, I'm quite sure. And we're in Kentucky, and my phone rings, and it's my brother. And he said, Dad passed away last night.
Ooh.
And so he never got to see me play with a real nice band. And he was so into it that he was hoping that I would make it in music. He always wanted one of his kids to be a musician. And so he was so excited to come and see Dobie. We were going to play in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And my sister went to visit him the day before. And he says, I'm not going to be around to see Joe. And that's kind of how it ended. So I went on with Dobie for several weeks, and but my poor father never got to see his son play on a real nice gig. We had some, funny little frat party gigs we did growing up, but this was a legitimate, nice gig. Dobie Gray was a great singer, great guy, great singer, really, really good. Make you proud to play in his band, and. But That's how.
But
So, anyways,
your family did get to see you though. The rest of your family.
yes, my poor father was they had the funeral, and but my mother got the courage up, and her brother and his wife and all cousins and everybody came to see Dobie, and that's where that's where the healing began from me leaving home. To answer your question, you know, it was just kind of spotty on and off before then, but Dad dying and then the Dobie Gray gig and everybody making a big fuss over that. That's when the healing really took place, and you know, and I've been going back home. I don't like to fly now, but I would go back home a couple times a year, every year, and visit with them, and maybe Christmas, or you know, excuse me. But yeah, that's that was the turning point from running away from home at 16 years old. Man, unbelievable. If anybody's out there listening, don't do that. Don't do it. Do not.
Well, Joe, I just want to say thank you for taking almost over an hour and 20 minutes of your time to spend with me.
Oh, well, thank you so much, John. I'm really happy to be here. I didn't realize it was that long. It was over an hour, huh? Wow.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Well, maybe we can do this again.
I would like to do this again.
You know what might be?
Go ahead.
It might be fun to maybe we could spin some sides and talk about the particulars of those records.
We could do that sometime.
Yeah, that'd be fun. But thank you, man. Thank you so much. I can't believe you're in Haverhill and I'm in California, and that's where I'm from. You know, so
yeah, you're originally from here.
Yeah.
I was amazed when I went to see John in Cambridge, and then you were at Boarding House Park here in Lowell playing, and every time you were in town, he mentioned the fact that his drummer was from Haverhill, Massachusetts. Every time.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I remember that, and my family were at all those shows, and they loved it, and they would commandeer the entire dressing room, not room for a musician anywhere.
Yeah,
all my family and cousins and friends and everybody just having a great time, eating a cookie or something, from the Rider food or something.
There you go.
Yeah, those are great gigs, those Lowell gigs. I enjoyed those.
Well, Joe, thank you again. I'm going to let you get back to what you're doing, and I'll be in touch. Don't worry. I know how to get a hold of you.
Okay, excellent, John. Thank you so much, man.
I'll turn you on to some new music like I have been.
Yeah, please do. Please do. I'm all set now. I know you got the library of Doom there. You got it all. So
yeah,
excellent.
I'll hook you up.
Excellent.
All right.
Okay, Johnny. Thanks, buddy.
You. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.
Yep.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.